Hey, everybody. Welcome to another VSG Oceanside chat. If you don't know, VSG is USC Viterbi's unique incubator out in Marina del Rey for early stage tech startups, where we support teams for a full year as they incubate with us, and we provide them services. A lot of those services are exclusive to the teams, but our Oceanside chats are actually our public-facing resource to just our ecosystem of people interested in innovation. So this room is probably filled with students, faculty, early stage entrepreneurs, and maybe some specialists who are really interested in the topic. Today, we have Houman Zarabi. He's joining us as a senior product manager at Disney Streaming, where he leads product strategy for consumer-facing commerce platforms. He's innovative. He's been innovating in the space for 7+ years, and he specializes in product market fit, pricing models, customer discovery, storytelling, and R&D. He's been working in SaaS, media, and in consumer services for that time. He's known for building and managing cross-functional teams. He blends his technical expertise with his empathy. I'm a big fan of what people consider soft skills, which I consider power skills, so that he can deliver scalable and impactful products. He understands product growth, lifecycle management, and customer acquisition strategies, which for early stage startups, that's it, right? You guys need to get those customers through the door. And his mission is to balance business goals with user needs. He's based in LA and he's a USC alum, so fight on. And today he'll be talking about product management, rediscovering the roots of innovation. And one of the things we discussed earlier was how he's really going to think about product thinking and less about the logistics of product management. I'm going to pass it over to Houman to give a little bit maybe more color to his bio and share his screen and get the show started. I'm just so happy to have you. I always say this at the beginning, we'll have you back again. We're going to hook you in. You're going to do another Oceanside chat in the future, but go ahead and take it away, Houman.
Awesome. Thank you. I will be back for sure. Hi, friends. My name is Houman Zarabi. As Arcelia mentioned, I'm going to be joining as a mentor for the Startup Garage. So thank you, Arcelia. Thank you, Dave. And I'm excited to work with all of you guys over the next few months and, hopefully a few years, to get your ideas off the ground, to hopefully inspire you a little bit and just build, amazing things. So just some background about myself. I went to USC. I graduated in 2017 with a bachelor's in computer science and business. And that was kind of, a great starting point and experience for me, my time at USC, where I got really a great formal introduction into products and startups and entrepreneurship. And I remember, when I was applying to USC, I always loved business. I loved, businesses that make money. I love entrepreneurship, finance, so on and so forth. But I always loved also at the same time understanding how things worked, coding, understanding technology. And I was trying to figure out where is the intersection between that? How can let me just admit this person, how can I find something that feeds both of those interests? And I got very, very lucky, also having been from USC, to get accepted to the CSBA Computer Science and Business Administration program at USC. And so when I started at USC in 2013, the tech environment was very, very different than it is now. It was very raw. There were still, tech companies that were coming out a lot of tech companies that were coming out of LA. San Francisco was obviously still a leader. New York was great. And I remember the environment at USC was particularly very encouraging. We had, I don't think any of you guys were there. There was the old village, and we had a hacker house at the village where people would come in and everybody would be on a screen or on their computer kind of coding and working on their own startups, but also engaging and communicating and collaborating and kind of ideating together, which I thought, was super exciting. And I know there's, still some resources like that at USC, but what I'm seeing less in terms of startup building is that grittiness, that hacker mentality. And I really think that is what is going to, what is going to kind of encourage the next generation of startups. And I really want to kind of go back to that, where folks are thinking a little bit more outside the box. They're being a little bit more creative, and gritty. So all that to say, this is what this presentation is about. I am not a casual person at all. I'm not going to use big words and try to impress you or anything like that. I want to have like a fairly like philosophical conversation about product management, product thinking, and then also open it up for debate. So yeah, that's what I'm looking to do. I'm going to let Dave in. All right, hopefully we have Dave now. Hi, Dave, and let's jump into it. So as I was mentioning, and let's kind of talk about the structure of the presentation. I want to talk about the intro. So, what is product management? What is product thinking? And the qualities that I think make a great product manager. We'll go into PM origins, which I'm going to show you guys some like videos, which are hopefully some inspiration for how I remember people in tech and otherwise startups thinking about how to build products that hopefully will inspire you to build your startups. Talk about where I think like we kind of got off track, where we lost track of that North Star, and why that happened. And then talk about why I think there's a huge opportunity to get back into the product thinking, the way we were innovating, people were gritty, hacky, and so on and so forth. So if there's no questions, I'm going to jump into it. So what is product management and why does it matter? So I'm not going to talk about product management as it pertains to the day-to-day. So at my job, it's very different than I think what product management should be. And so I'm not going to talk about, oh, you have to write tickets and stories and specs. Like the operational parts and the day-to-day parts of the job, I don't want to talk about. It's not important. What I do want to talk about are the qualities that go into product management and the shared qualities that I think make everybody or make people great product managers, great product thinkers, and leaders. And so the first thing, product management isn't a job, it's a way of thinking. And I say this because there's no mold of a product manager. There's no one that you're like, okay, like this person, because they studied computer science is a great product manager, or because they studied business is a great product manager. That is not what makes you a great product manager. Product managers come in all shapes and sizes, and oftentimes the people that are the best product managers are not product managers themselves. They just have certain qualities and ways of thinking, curiosities, and so on and so forth that make them those people. And so I think it was last week, I was at the Burbank office, Disney Burbank office, and we had a panel of associate product managers that work at Google. And these are people that are very early on in their in their careers. And the APM program at Google is like the best of the best. So it's like the JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs of finance. And so, what I was curious about was like, how did you guys get into product management? Like, what was your background before? And you had all types of people. That you had people that studied philosophy, people that were studying biology, and so on and so forth. And then you had the people that like maybe had a more direct understanding of product, and like they naturally went into the things that are more hard skills. So somebody studied computer science and so on. I have always admired the fact that like product management is like a multidisciplinary career, multidisciplinary occupation and a way of thinking. And so that's the point that I want to hit home, especially for those of you that are working on startups or aspire to work on startups. I didn't want to make this about the job, because you guys are working on startups. I don't want you to get into product management. I want you to flourish and build a successful startup. So moving on from that, there are, I think, 6 instincts or attributes that make a great product manager, someone who's a great product thinker. The first one is Curiosity. I think everybody needs some level of curiosity, and the people that stand out are largely the people that, like, without being asked to, organically are always looking to understand the how and the why of how things work. Um, I'm an only child, and like, I moved around a bunch when I was younger, and I remember like I kind of grew up on the early internet, and so like I was always, occupying my time and Googling things and trying to understand how things work. And like I remember like I would follow like all the latest Windows updates and rumors and all that stuff, like all these like nerdy things, but like it kind of like took me towards a natural curiosity of trying to understand how tech companies work, how finance works, how design works, who are the leaders in different industries, how things work the way that they work. And that then kind of led me to, trying to question things, pushing against the constraints, and learning without being prompted to. And so like I've always enjoyed reading. I still read things. I think I remember when I was younger, I would read like these older tech publications, Gizmodo and Boy Genius Report and all these things that like you might see on Twitter now. I was always kind of up on those things. So I think you need to have a curiosity. Like that's kind of the motivation I would say, for a tech founder is like no one's asking you to do something, no one's giving you a task. You need to have that curiosity that will drive and develop and further your business. Any questions about curiosity? I wonder, if you guys have any thoughts on how to think about this, how it pertains to your startups.
I have just a general question. With curiosity, sometimes I think people think it's like a nature, right? You're curious by nature, but maybe let's just adopt the idea that that's the case, right? And so then maybe you're a startup founder and you're not so curious. How would you suggest, kind of inspiring founders to, are there like things they can do, books they could read, any resources you can provide for maybe a less curious
Yeah.
founder?
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like that's a contradiction. Like, because if you are a startup founder, you have curiosity. Maybe it's not like a general curiosity, but you have a curiosity in the industry that you're working in. You have to have a curiosity in the industry that you're working in. And so when you're building those products, the curiosity is going to kind of let you build either a new product that doesn't exist. You have to take inspiration from things that are tangential or maybe things that are completely unrelated, but that's where you're going to get your inspiration. If you're building something that has competitors, you need that curiosity to understand, why your competitors are successful, what they're doing right, and then try to kind of build a competitive advantage against those people. So like I think all of you guys should have some curiosity. It doesn't have to be a wide curiosity, but it should have to, exist in one way or another. You should have that spirit. That's a great question. But I will say is like, assuming you guys are building, some tech product or something technical, is like just reading, the latest, tech news, the news that corresponds to the industry that you're in. I'm using Twitter all the time. I have one of my friends here that like we're consistently just sending each other the latest in finance and tech, and just like debating those things and trying to like forecast like what that means for the company. So yeah, I think those things are fun. Use the resources that are available to you, and yeah, cool. Any other questions? All right, and these are like in no like priority or importance. Like all these are equally important. The next thing is critical thinking. And I think the most successful, product managers, the most successful tech entrepreneurs are the people that are consistently questioning the status quo. They're questioning why something was built that way. They're questioning the process. They're questioning whether even like the largest companies are doing it right. And so as startup founders or people that just aspire to be, great product managers or product builders, you always need to, work with critical thinking. You always need to have critical thinking. And oftentimes kind of reject the status quo, or like the fact that like people say, this is just how it is. Those are oftentimes the biggest opportunities to innovate. They're oftentimes the biggest opportunities to build, a new product market fit. And so that's what I would say, like equally important to curiosity. You should always be trying to sort through the noise, and the distractions, and the limitations that other people put on you, and always look towards truth and logic and rationality. This kind of goes hand in hand with like irrational confidence. A lot of times, and you see this like with like an Elon Musk, for example, right? Like he is always pushing against the status quo. When like people probably told him early on, people were telling him like Tesla is not going to succeed. Like there's no way. Why are you like burning your last few $1 million on it? Like he worked with critical thinking. Like he had a completely different perspective than other people, and he pushed forward. So I think that's super important. We're going to talk about resiliency as well in a future slide. Any questions about this? Okay.
Actually do have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
It's just about this idea of like building product market fit versus finding it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I feel like when in the early stages of development, founders are asked to do a ton of customer discovery, right? And so this idea of like product market fit is something that you find, it's like something that's really pushed. And so this idea of like building product market fit, right, which is kind of more on this innovative side, which is this idea that like you're rejecting that people maybe don't think they need or want something, and working against that. Am I understanding correctly? Like that, because what you were talking about sounds like you're like to build something that has product market fit versus discovering the product market fit in what it is that you're building.
What's your exact question, Arceli? I'm sorry.
I think what I'm asking is there a difference between that, or is there like an element of customer discovery that you include in when you are rejecting that's just how it is?
Yeah, so I mean, critical thinking, like you need to work with facts and logic, and part of that is you take customer feedback, for example, or you take environmental factors, you look at your competitors and so on and so forth. And oftentimes, like what you have, like why critical thinking is important is like you will dive deeper than just looking at the layers of that information. You're going to ask why. You're going to look into why something is. Why is a customer more inclined to like not, why is a customer less inclined to subscribe to this sort of startup or business or buy this product and so on and so forth. And like I think where critical thinking comes in is like, let's say you get industry information where like we see customers are, in my industry for example, customers are less inclined to sign up for ad tiers of a streaming brand or something, right? You're not going to take that at face value. You're going to try to understand why. You're going to experiment. You're going to do your own research, and like not take that as fact until you have vetted something and like you see it for yourself. And I think that's where critical thinking is important, is like kind of going past the cloud, going past the blurriness and the ambiguity of the information you have available or that others are giving you. Great.
Thanks.
Awesome. Multidisciplinary, and this is what I was talking about, is as startup founders, like you're going to be working with all types of people, and you're going to need to relate to all types of people. And a part of that is obviously, most founders are great at the big picture. So I have a product, I want to launch a, supplement brand, for example, right? And a subscription supplement brand. And so, you might start with, hey, I understand I have to source something and I have to build a website. And then there's like something with subscriptions that I have to do at the same time. But the best startup founders are the ones that like don't only understand the big picture, but understand the lower level intricacies of their business and their idea. So they understand to some degree the tech, they understand the platform that they want to build it on, the supply chain, the branding, so on and so forth. Because that way they don't build the product in silos where they just kind of defer to someone on their team or a subject matter expert or a consultant or something to build one part of their business. They're involved in everything and all the moving pieces and how they fit together, because that creates cohesion in your products. And so I see this pitfall often with product managers, where they just know like they just maybe know branding, they know marketing, or maybe they only know back end platforms, but they don't know anything about growth and customer acquisition. And I think like those, although it might work in most company settings, does not work by yourself, and kind of pigeonholes you into becoming a less useful and effective product manager. So in short, I think like and this kind of ties into curiosity, is you should know to some degree how the different pieces work and how they fit together. So that's design. You might not be the best designer. Nobody's going to be asking you to go into Figma and create your UI, but you should know design practices. You might not be the best engineer, but you should know how a web app works, what APIs are, so you can forecast, the difficulty or the scope of your business and your project, right? So I see this a lot with founders, is they don't have a technical background, and as a result, they don't understand what it's going to take to build their business. And nobody's asking you to know how to code, but you should know, the platforms and the nuances around how you should build your business and where you should launch it. Should you launch it web first? Should you launch it mobile first? And so on and so forth. And there's tons and tons, right? So like having the business acumen, understanding the financial implications of your business. How do you want to grow? What's your run rates? How long do you think you're going to be able to run it? Are you bootstrapping it yourself, or do you need financial backing? And so those are all very important. Probably the three main things, but not the only three things. There's so many, and I think oftentimes it's not things that you can even like synthesize. It's just like different qualities. And so that kind of ties into curiosity, where curiosity will lead you into understanding these different domains. And then that will create a lot of clarity for you, where you can synthesize these inputs, your expectations and your requirements. I know I mentioned I'm not going to talk about like the day-to-day of product management, but like this is especially important if you're working as a product manager or otherwise, because you have to write requirements, and you have to write requirements thoroughly enough so the people that you're working with know how to implement and integrate them. I'm going to like hint at a future slide, but with AI and prompting, this is like super, super important, right? Like when you're writing a prompt and eventually AI is going to become the consumer, you want to write your prompts the best way possible. And that means writing them with clarity, being able to very succinctly describe what you want, whether it's the front end, the back end, the business, the business expectation, especially if you're trying to put together a business plan or something like that, right? So that's super important. Questions about this?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my question is, what other like disciplines did you have to end up learning through your career, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like, it never came as like, oh, I need to understand, for example, finance, or I need to understand business. It all kind of like organically came together. And so that kind of ties into the curiosity. Some of the other things are like data and interpreting data. is very important, right? And so data experimentation, modeling, looking at insights, are probably kind of subdomains of the things that I'm talking about. But probably the fourth most important one is looking at the data of your business, which will let you be reactive, but sometimes it might also let you be proactive, right? And so like if you're seeing, for example, you have a subscription business, you're seeing somewhere in the experience users are engaging less, you can look into that. You can be a little bit, more proactive. You can iterate and so on and so forth. So data as it pertains to like engagement data, data as it pertains to like subscription data and financial data, all these things are super important. I think that's probably the fourth most important one. Otherwise, I think like marketing and communication are super important. I'm going to talk about communication in a little bit. Like understanding how to speak with your target demographic, your target customer, and speak the same language is also very important, and that ties into writing copy. So like marketing text and advertising and all that good stuff is another important discipline that you should know to some degree as you're launching your business. Cool.
I have a question. So I think, this kind of cross-departmental management, it kind of starts foundationally to avoid the silos. You have to really think about it early as you start your first hires and start building out your business. Because then otherwise what ends up having to happen is somebody comes in as a product manager and has to solve for those problems. So do you have any advice for teams that are early, that are just building out their like teams? Ways that what tools or anything that they could maybe start doing, or practices that they could do early, or maybe also if they have trouble with this kind of interdepartmental synergy, things that you've used to kind of solve that, to like reverse course.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to emphasize is like product managers, and this is kind of like alluding to, you have to be a great generalist, right? You have to know a bunch of different domains. You don't have to know everything perfectly. You don't have to be a professional or an expert in everything, but you have to understand how the pieces fit together. But you also have to understand where your limitations are, and that's where you have to build a great team, and gather people that complement your skill sets. Right. And so like, for example, like I'm not a great designer. I know how to build flows. I know how to build like sequences for acquisition, for retention. But like when I have to put like color and detail into those things, I'm not good at that at all. And so like that's where I know where to lean on my design partners, to do those types of things. Whereas like I am pretty, like I think I'm pretty technical. I understand like technical details, API services pretty well. And like that's where I might be a little bit more involved, but I will still rely on my engineers. And so I think like in short, build a great team, build people that complement you, complement your weaknesses, and are great communicators at the same time. Great. All right, so really quickly, I think we're at the halfway mark. Communication. This is, I'm going to put this at the top of the list. Maybe not say it's important than anything else, but communication, stakeholder management is like the toughest part. And so, we were talking about like hard skills. So like engineering, like finance, data insights, so on and so forth. But the hardest part of a product manager's job is stakeholder management. And that's because stakeholder management is open-ended. Like there is no science to how you convince somebody to do something. There's no science how, you can convince somebody that you won't build something this quarter, but you'll build it the next quarter. Or like why, or how to make an argument against somebody's, product request, right? And so like this is like something that I didn't know when I got into product management. And to give you an idea, I studied computer science and business, And the reason that I went into product management was like, I want to be involved in the stakeholder management. I don't want to just kind of like code something that somebody tells me, because I might disagree with it. I might think you can build it a different way. I might not think you should build that at all. And so that's where I wanted to be a little bit more involved in strategy. But what I didn't realize is like, that is like the stakeholder management is exponentially more difficult than the coding. You have different personalities, you have people that have, you know, their own incentives and pressures, and their own quirks. And so that's where communication is probably the most pivotal way that you can build a great product, along with critical thinking, is you have to know how to manage people, manage priorities, but also relay that in a clear way, relay that, you know, with detail, relay that in a way that, you know, other people can relate to. And then we also talked about stakeholder, multidisciplinary stakeholders. You have to know how to talk to people in the way that they understand. I disagree with, like, oftentimes in product interviews, you know, people might be inclined to say, oh, like, you know, when I want to talk to my engineers, I talk to them in like a technical way. I disagree with that in certain ways, because you might relate, you know, product requirements in technical ways, or in ways that, you know, they need to implement it. But when you want to talk about priorities and why we're building a feature, why we're doing something a certain way that the business asks you to do, you talk about that the same way you talk to anybody else. People understand priorities, people understand financial needs and incentives. And so that's where, like, you have to practice empathy. You have to relate to people, and each person is different. So you're going to have to understand how people communicate with you so you can communicate with them. Questions?
We have a question, a private question from the chat that I'll generalize. It's not exactly about communication, but I'm gonna jump into it. So they're essentially asking, where in the product development lifecycle is it important to start thinking about the legality of what it is you're building, especially if what you're building might have some challenges legally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a great answer for you, but what I would say is like you need to understand what is a hard legal, like, but legal limitation, and like where it's a little bit more blurry, right? And so what I encourage all of you guys to do is, like, don't become discouraged uh by like limitations, by restrictions, and so on and so forth. I think like the best founders are the people that like pushed against those limits. So we talked about Elon Musk. All of the most successful startups are people that pushed against either their own mental kind of constraints and doubts, or, you know, more hard constraints like legal constraints. And so I don't have a great answer for you. Like, I think you ultimately need to decide yourself, is this like a huge limitation? Is this like an actual hard block where there's like a very explicit law about this, or regulation? Or can I build a product and get around that somehow? You know, you might even lobby, you might work with your local, you know, lawmakers, and so on and so forth. That's a great question. I don't have an exact answer to it, but that's how I would go about it, is like, don't doubt yourself immediately until you think about it critically and you come to the conclusion that you either can or cannot get around it.
I think you did answer it. It's know the limits, know the gray areas, right?
Yeah.
And in order to know the limits, you need to speak with the lawyer. Then that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, I think that's really great advice.
Yeah.
And then we have, oh, go ahead.
I was going to mention something, like I've heard a ton, like, for example, like there are states that add, you know, legalities around, oh, if you have a subscription service, you have to email subscribers before they're going to be, you know, billed or something. Like, those are like where I would say like those are a little bit more blurred, right? Like there are tons of, very established companies that are breaking laws, not like very critical laws, but like they're just taking fines, right? And so you have to figure out where, you're willing to take that risk. But I'm not telling you to break the law.
Right.
Consider where it's blurred.
That's not been said.
You're right.
Okay, and then we have a question from Diora.
Hi, thanks for coming in. This has been super interesting. I wanted to ask, what is sort of the strategies that you use to get people in your team to like really care? Because I know that, that's something that's really important for people to be putting in like their best work and to be like really dedicated. So I guess in your experience, how have you sort of interacted with people in a way to really get them to care about the product and care about like contributing to the best of their potential?
Yeah, there's a great book, my favorite book actually. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so I think like that's a very timeless book. I would encourage you to read it. And some of the inspiration that I take away from it is like one, you can't force somebody to understand your point of view. You can't force somebody to understand your perspective. They ultimately have to come to that conclusion themselves. And so the way that you help them do that is by using facts, using things that are objective, and like practicing empathy. Empathy is the most important way to go about it. You have to help them understand your perspective, but you can't force them to understand your perspective. And you do that with empathy. You do that with like very clear communication, patience, and also try to relate it to them as well. One of the other important points of the book is like people are very motivated by the feeling of importance. And so the book is not about manipulating people, but it's about like the facts, and people are motivated by the feeling of importance, and make them feel like they're important, make them feel like they're part of that decision and the process. And you're not always going to convince them one way or another, or make them see your point of view, but hopefully you can find some middle ground.
That's awesome. Thank you. Could you repeat the name of the book?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Thanks.
I also
Thank
think kind of just calling back to something you said earlier when you're building your team, I think that, it's so important to build the right people around you that are already kind of dedicated and interested and have that natural drive, because the challenge of motivating people is that it's a huge commitment of your time, which is good work. It's not saying that it's not good work, but there's always this point, especially as a leader, where you have to determine, am I working too hard? Is it time for this relationship to end? And that's just like when it comes to when you start thinking about recruiting and hiring practices, so that you avoid that kind of consistent turnover. I mean, would you agree, Fumin? That's something that you were saying earlier.
Without a doubt. It's a huge investment for sure. Okay, I'm going to move forward. We have a lot of things coming up. So pragmatic and rational, this is a little bit similar, overlapping with critical thinking, but you want to think with logic, not impulse. Don't become obsessed with the process. Don't become restricted by the process. And this is where you question the way that things are, the way that most people do something, think about something, and choose evidence over habit. That's always kind of the theme of always trying to move towards truth. And the truth is always not clear, but trying to get to that conclusion as best as you can over habit. There are many people within your startup life that will impose upon you their opinions and the ways that they think you should do something. They might discourage you. Don't let that happen. Follow your own path and follow what the truth and evidence is. I'm going to move forward because we have a bunch of other things. And then I'm going to finish it off with resiliency, kind of touching on what I was talking about last. like you have to almost be working as a startup founder with a like irrational confidence. And that means like we talked about legal setbacks, product setbacks, technical issues, so on and so forth, or just people around you in your environment that are telling you can't do something. The best products are the ones that went against like probably common logic and like probably like the what do I want to say, common logic and like confidence of what's possible, right? And so we talked about Tesla, even talking about like something like an OpenAI, so on and so forth. Like those are all the people that started all these larger tech companies. Their products were very innovative at those times, and I'm sure many times they're either told by investors or other people that this is just not a viable business, this is not a viable idea, this will never survive, this will never make money, this will never be profitable. You have to put all that aside, and then in the day-to-day, there will be challenges. You'll have challenges with the people that you work with, you'll have challenges with the products that you launch. They might take longer than possible. You might realize that the scope of the product that you're building is much larger than you anticipated. Don't let yourself become demotivated and discouraged by those types of things. If you have conviction, and you work with rationality and critical thinking, and prove to yourself that your business is valuable, then it's likely a viable business. So, all right. Any questions about this? Be confident in yourself. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Cool. So instead of talking to you about like the origins of product management, I want to show you guys like some videos about the early days of like maybe like the early 2000s, where I think like people were more inclined, with less available, with less tools and resources, people were like so much more encouraged to push against the limits of what is possible, what's been built. And like what I want to kind of emphasize here is it's not always that you want to build something that is a completely new revolutionary technology. Oftentimes innovating might be very trivial from an outsider's perspective, but very complicated from your perspective. And so these are some examples from like Google and Instagram on like maybe things that might seem small, but were actually like super effective in a lot of the businesses or the products that we use today. So the first one is Gmail. So this is the creator. Hopefully it loads. Can you guys hear me? Okay. This is the creator of
the first time I tried to build an email project, I ran into this problem where I like was writing a bunch of code for a while, and then I got bored and kind of like distracted. And so one of the things I kind of had learned over the years is that just my own psychology, I have to always be keeping myself sort of engaged in the product. And so for me, what I really like is to always
I stopped hearing the audio. I don't know if it's the same for everybody. Also stopped for you, Diora? Yeah. It just kind of stopped, I would say maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds ago.
Did the audio stop?
Yeah.
Let me restart.
the first time I tried to build an email.
I think it's because you muted yourself.
Okay, I will unmute and restart. Thank you.
The first time I tried to build an email project, I ran into this problem where I like was writing a bunch of code for a while, and then I got bored and kind of like distracted. And so one of the things I kind of had learned over the years is that just my own psychology, I have to always be keeping myself sort of engaged in the product. And so for me, what I really like is to always be launching things. And so with Gmail, I was able to build the first version in a day and then launch it. And so what I did was I just took this Usenet indexing code that I had from the previous project, and then I took my email, my mailbox, and I just wrote a script to convert the email to look like Usenet data, and then I just shoved my email into this Usenet search. And then I just like launched it. I just sent it out to engineering to be like, hey guys, I built like this email search, let me know what you think. And so, that's like the first version, day zero of Gmail, because I launched this product.
What did people say?
People said, well, it's kind of useful, but it would be better if I had my email instead of yours. And so that's like a feature request. And so, it was all just iterative. So I built the first version in one day, and then I got feature requests, which is like after people wanted to search their own email, not just my email. So then I'm like, okay, now I know what to do. And so like I went to work and I made this thing that would kind of like fall through the home directories and suck up people's email and index it and then partition it so that it would just get like one person at a time. And then, I had like version 2. So I launched it again. Okay, now I have email search with your email. And so then people would be like, okay, this is cool. And now I want to reply to an email. I'm like, okay. So then I went in and added a reply feature and just, iteratively would launch, a new version every day or two. And then just constantly people would complain about, now they want to send email or whatever, they want.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that a little bit early. I will send this deck. You can watch the whole video. But the kind of the call out there, and I was going to ask for feedback on like where you see those instincts in this example, but I'll kind of just tell you. And so one of it is like the curiosity, right? And so, this was somebody who was tasked with creating an email client for Google, but like based on, just his drive and resiliency, he's just like, I'm going to create a new way to search for email, a new way to filter for emails. And like that became Gmail, which still to this day is such a superior like email service, right? And so I think like these are like little examples where I think he was initially an engineer and then became like a product manager. Somebody was tasked with something, and instead of like just trying to build something that was a direct competitor to another product, he thought about it. He tried to be a little bit more, think outside the box. He implemented his own knowledge in, indexing and like different technologies that had not been implemented on like email clients before, and then made Gmail. And soon he saw that like everybody around him, he probably communicated it, kind of dispersed the idea, got feedback. That's the communication aspect of it. Everybody around him kind of slowly started seeing the opportunities to extend those functionalities to other types of features of Gmail. So I'm going to move forward. There's another Gmail example, and I purposefully added the first one because the second one is like so much more exciting. And I think this highlights like iteration, like incrementation of your products. And so the first version of Gmail, like revolutionary in the terms of like that sort of consumption of email didn't exist before. This one is more so about like a additional feature or a change to an existing feature, and it's about upgrading the Gmail storage capacity from 1 gigabyte, which is crazy at that time, to 2 gigabytes, which was even crazier. And so this is the creator of Google Analytics, who also worked on Gmail. And think about this two gigabyte moment. That's an important phrase that I want to ask you guys about at some point.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. He said that I had to ask this one, which was in terms of the very early days at Google, working with Larry and Sergey in particular, what are the 1 to 2 significant product insights you have from that time?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I still remember pitching Google Analytics and working on the ad system early on, and they just look at me and say, "Why are you wasting your time on this?" They always would push me and say, "Wesley, you got to go work on something that changes the world. Life is too short." This is not big enough. And, you know, when you're 21 and you sort of hear this, like, you just, like, your heart just breaks, right? You're sitting there going, I've just spent the last, like, 2 weeks coming up with this proposal and doing all this research. And you're like, you know, at this executive meeting with Larry and Sergey, the founders of the company, and they just poo-poo the whole idea and say it's not big enough. And that was the most, you know, amazing experience. It stung in the moment, but it's, you know, one of the most defining moments where I look at this and go, is this big enough to go change the world? Is this something worthy of, you know, Google and worthy of my time at Google, right? And it was one of those things where every time I would bring them a product, or I work with or mentor other product managers or mentor other engineers that would, you know, sort of say, I want to go build this. I just look at this. I'm like, you know, Larry and Sergey are gonna rip you apart and ask the question, is this big enough for the world? And if you can't answer that question with a straight face, then you're not going to get this through. Like, no chance he's going to fund it or approve it or let you go do this. And it's one of those things where, as you know, it affects my investing. And I look at things like Canva or like Plaid or Gusto, companies that have done well, but, like, you know, were not obvious when I did the investment. And I said, all right, I look at founders in the audience, are you doing this? And is it worth your time? And is it big enough for the world? And if they could answer yes with a straight face, I'd be like, I'll back up the truck. Of course I'll back you. And, you know, I was able to write the first check in the, you know, companies like Robinhood or Plaid or Gusto or Flexport, and, you know, because the founders had this dream of building something that would go change the world. And so that is probably one of the most, you know, unique product insights that I had at Google, was build something the world wants and that's big enough for the world. I still remember I was helping out my friend Brian Murkowski, who was the product manager at Gmail before it launched, right? And I still remember sitting in on the product meeting with Larry and Sergey, and, you know, the whole team comes up to Larry and Sergey and says, we're going to change all of how people do email. And you remember back in the days, there was Hotmail and Yahoo, and they would give you 25 megabytes, right? And so they had written on their deck that we were going to give everybody 200 megabytes. It's almost 10 times more than Yahoo or Hotmail was giving at that point, right? And this was like long ago when storage was really, really expensive, and hard drives, you know, cost like, you know, $1,000 a gigabyte or something crazy like that, right? And so Larry just walks up to the whiteboard, writes down 200 megabytes. He said, this is what you guys want to give to people, right? And everybody in the room nods and that's amazing. Like, you know, it's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to be amazing, but we have these amazing algorithms of compressed data and everything else. And he crosses it out and writes 2 gigabytes. And back then, 2 gigabytes, like, it was insane, right? Like, you know, you look at cost of storage, it would have bankrupt the whole company. And everybody just, like, in the room just gasps loud and says, like, oh my God, 2 gigabytes. How the hell are we going to pull that off, right? And Larry's like, I don't want you coming back to me until you figure out a way to do 2 gigabytes of storage on their email for everybody. That's massive order of magnitude difference. And he goes, that's the product feature that people will go towards. And everybody freaks out and says, oh, they're going to store the porn in their MP3s, and they're going to store the video files on Gmail. And Larry's just like, you can solve that problem by just blocking the file types, not letting people do that. And he says that the other non-obvious insight is that people are not going to fill up 2 gigabytes that quickly, right? It's going to be only, like, you know, 0.1% of the users that are going to fill it up and, like, use it as a storage system. And you can block that too. And he goes, by the time people fill 2 gigabytes, like, this cost of storage with Moore's law will have dropped massively. And I'm sitting there going, like, holy cow, you know, we could actually pull this off, right? And, you know, Brian and the team went back and, like, worked down 2 gigabytes and figured a way to do this in such a way that, you know, that was the offer. And remember, everybody freaked out, like, you know, when they launched it, like, invites only, they were selling on eBay for thousands of dollars to get access to Gmail. And it was one of those things where I just kind of looked at that and went, like, boy, like, this is an order of magnitude difference. And, like, watching that firsthand and live in that room of, like, you know, creating, you know, what is today the most used email system in the world, and watching that sort of origin story sort of happen in that room when they decided between 2 gigabytes and 200 megabytes, I was sitting there going, like, holy cow, what if founders could pull this off, right? And that informs my investing. I ask founders and I tell the story, what's your 2 gigabyte moment? Like, you know, you're telling me something that's incremental, and I'm looking for the 2 gigabyte when everybody else has 25 megabyte moment. That was Canva, right? Like, you know, like, you look at Photoshop, you look at Office, and look at these other companies. And Mel and Cliff, the founders of Canva, figured out how to pull it off by building something that wasn't just incremental, it was revolutionary, right? You look at Plaid in the same way people were, you know, looking at logging into bank accounts and having to do those stupid, you know, direct deposits and, like, you know, write down the 16 cents and the 42 cents that, you know, people would have to deposit. It would take 2 weeks to go figure out how to, like, create a bank account. They reimagined that and did it instantly by, like, you know, using by building a product that allowed people to sort of sign on and onboard quickly. I mean, these are revolutionary changes for a lot of the products that happen. Those are the ones that, you know, I invest in, and the ones that have certain, you know, both the world, the founders, and, you know, my investing track record pretty damn well, right? So, you know, I look for those things that are the 2 gigabyte moments.
Can I
Okay. Hopefully that inspired you to think about your 2 gigabyte moment. And, you know, some themes there, right? So it's resiliency. Like, people around you, people around them are saying, like, there's no way to do this. Like, the storage limits are so hard, everything's so expensive, it's going to bankrupt the company. And the founders of Google, like we're resilient. They're like, okay, we'll figure out solutions. We'll block certain storage types, Moore's law, so on and so forth. And so it's finding where the potential and the solutions are in, between the noise, I think is what you guys want to do. Continue to think about that 2 GB moment. This is my absolute favorite video on people that aspire to build revolutionary products. They don't have to be revolutionary, but in terms of functionality, they could be revolutionary. 2 GB was almost impossible back then, and they made it possible. So, yeah. Questions about this? I'll try to be quick. Hopefully, you guys can stay a few minutes after. Comments?
Hey, Human, this is Adarsh. I got a quick question. So relating to what you just showed, the 2 videos, one of the things I found frustrating when I was relying on other people's software in the days when I was like working for hardware development. I found that some of these new startup companies where they have an idea of a revised or an more updated version of a legacy tool that we're using, and but they really don't understand the end users, like like how an end user would end up using the tool because they themselves have never done any product development. And I found that they launched the product with really great marketing, but then when you start like using their product every day, like it's just so poorly designed, and the features keep breaking, or the features don't even exist. But they're very, very like pushy, like, hey, tell us the feedback on a daily basis.
Yep.
Almost felt like as if I am educating them on how to design the perfect product with me, when I could have just gone away and did that with someone else, right? And so where do you draw the line where you don't frustrate your customers, like constantly pestering them with asking for feedback, versus you do a good enough job where, the cycle of feedback is more, I guess, productive for the customer?
Yep.
Like, how do you, like, where do you draw the line?
I hear you. For the sake of time, let me answer that question to you offline. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can talk about that. I do want to kind of finish this because we are at time, and then I'm going to skip the Instagram example. You guys can look at that when I send this out. So how do we lose the plot? When these companies, Google and so on and so forth, were, working on these, projects, products, so on and so forth, they were small. There was like, in the early 2000s, there was no expectation, even going into like 2013, 20 up until maybe like 2015, there were companies that like were not expected to make immediate, profit or, a ton of revenue. And so it was a standard where you could take risks. Now, I think where we've shifted is, tech companies, financing is less, like there's less funding going around. Tech companies are looking to, prove their business a lot faster, and people are taking less risks because risks are costly. And so we have, these conglomerates of large companies. They are largely comfortable with where they are. They don't have to compete. Or, the companies are commoditized, the services are commoditized, somebody's buying, this other service, Facebook bought Instagram, or Instagram copied Snapchat. There's less of a willingness to take risks. And I think that's where we've gotten here, where product managers have become more so project managers, where companies, I'm not saying, we're not innovating anymore, but we're innovating less, and the innovation is coming more top down as opposed to bottom up, where we give individuals the opportunities to think about where the potential innovations could be, and then bubble those up to managers or executives. So I think that's how we got here. We can talk about that in more detail later. And then Brave New World. And so why I think this is kind of changing is we've talked about these restrictions of becoming or being innovative thinkers as product managers. And a lot of it has to do with cost and operations, or the inability to know multiple domains, or have to build, a large team. And that's kind of going away with AI. The gap between the idea and the execution is collapsing. You guys have probably used LLMs for ideation to get feedback. LLMs are not yet meant to be creative, but what they can do is help you in your critical thinking, give you market insights, competitive insights and research. And so like using AI and with AI as part of your business, it's really kind of eliminating the gaps for all of those instincts that we talked about, right? You can be more instinctual, you can rely more on your product intuition and focus a little bit less on like maybe understanding the legalities of your business. You can quickly look that up, how to build or start up your startup. Like I'm using like Cursor and like all these other tools to build some of my own ideas that like I never quite frankly had the opportunity to do myself. And the same exists for product managers, within companies. They can use these sort of tools to liberate themselves. So yeah, AI is going to accelerate, but it's not going to replace. And I alluded to earlier that like today, product managers in the field are writing requirements for engineers or other types of stakeholders. And so what is going to change is the people that consume those requirements. And I'm not saying software engineers are going to go away, but like a lot of that is going to become AI. Designers are not going to go away, but a lot of that is going to become, at the very least, AI in the beginning stages. And so product managers are still going to be so pivotal. Product thinking people are going to be so pivotal because AI is not going to take away those instincts, the judgments, your product taste, and you're still building things for humans, not machines. And so we're going to go from product managers that are writing requirements for people to product managers that are writing those same requirements for AI. And so if you're good at communication, if you're multidisciplinary and you can write some requirements for AI models to understand what you'd like to build, you have a huge advantage. And so I think like product managers have a huge advantage. They're used to doing exactly that, trying to formulate their needs and requirements and features into words. And we're just changing who's consuming those things. And so we're kind of going to see, hopefully, the resurgence of product-minded founders, people that have more opportunity to focus on these things and become less limited on limitations and the weight of execution. Yeah, that's hopefully how we're going to rediscover our roots. And I have one more video that hopefully will inspire you. This is about your life and how to apply startup thinking to your life and not only the things that you're building. I found this super inspirational.
My life's a startup. I'm the founding entrepreneur of my enterprise. And if I don't take sufficient risk, I'm not going to get big rewards. The rewards in life for the entrepreneurial startup of life is love and happiness. And you're not going to get rich in love and happiness unless you take significant risk and willing to have a complete disaster. You got to go all in, man. I can't wait for that soundbite to come back in my head. Like, that was awesome. You got to go all in. You got to go on in the enterprise of your life. It's one thing to borrow 10 million bucks from some rich guy and start some internet startup. How boring. How boring. The real startup is you. That's really where it's at. I tell young people today, I say, look, if you're not willing to give your heart away and have it get broken, you're not an entrepreneur, because that's really the risk that matters most.
Awesome. And that's my presentation. Thank you guys for listening. Very grateful to be working with the Startup Garage. And yeah, hopefully we can all work together soon.
Thanks so much, Human. I want to just reiterate one of your points, which I'm saying all the time, which is to have advanced conversations with yourself through AI. You should be leveraging how you can really have conversations with yourself and really kind of take your understanding about things to like the next level, because it's sitting there waiting to talk back to you and to answer your questions. And so and I think that's really helpful. Dave, I saw you came online. You have some comments?
No, great presentation, really interesting. Human, thank you very much. And we very much would love to have you work with our teams on a go-forward basis on for mentorship. And I think that you bring a lot to the table. This was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I hope to see all of you next week for the Oceanside chat. Bye.